Welcome in meeting 6 of TM105, Introduction to Computer Programming. And in today's session, we will talk about the single dimension array and string, basically in Java. So to start the topic with, suppose we have a problem. We want to read from the user 100 number, and for each number out of this 100, we want to compute the average and found how many numbers are above the average among these entered numbers. So in this case, we need to have these numbers stored in some way. So basically, the today objective is to describe why arrays are necessary in programming, to keep all these numbers together in one place, to declare array reference a variable and create array. So we will understand how we could declare array reference variable and how we actually could create array and give it initial values. We will also understand how to access array elements stored inside it using indexes. So we need to understand what's index. Also today objective to declare, create, and initialize an array using an array initializer. To program common array operation, there are a lot of common array operations that usually we do it on array, like searching for a specific value, finding and calculating the average or the maximum or the minimum. So all of them, or swap the elements or arrange the elements of the array in ascending or descending order. So all of it is actually common operations that we could perform it on array variable. To develop and invoke methods within array, so if we want to send the array variable to a method, or we want to invoke one of the methods with array parameters. So we will see how we could pass array variable. To search array elements using the linear search algorithm, so suppose you want to find where is the value and you need to access the specific element in that value. So we will see, like for example, if one of the students is already in the classroom or not, and already the names already stored inside array. So we need in this way to search inside the array element. To describe the string class basically work as an array of characters. So we will see later description about the string class and how we could use it. So first let us see how the array is stored in the memory. We could say that array is a data structure that represents a collection of same type of data. So basically, it is a location in memory that is reserved in sequence for a specific data type. We will access the first element of that array by the address where that element is stored. So basically, we have a reference to the first location or to the first element that array is holding. Then we can access the sequence of address based on the indexes. So we have basically, if we want to declare an array, we have the name of the array, which is here is my list, and we have also to determine the data type this array will hold. For example, here we have double. We use the square parenthesis to indicate that this variable is an array. So basically, we will store double values under the variable name mylist to store sequence variable, to store values in sequence, and these values will be from double data type. Then on the other side, we will have a new double 10, and this will basically indicate that we will reserve 10 space in memory. So 10 location in memory, which is basically in sequence, will be stored for storing these double values. Then to access the first element, basically we will call the variable name, which is out the array data type. Like here we have my list, and my list will basically, the variable here will store the reference to the memory location where is the first value of this array is stored in. So my list variable is having the location, the reference to memory location where the first value is stored in this array. Then this will be the first element, and the index basically to access each element inside this array is used starting from 0 until 9. So we reserve 10 spaces. The first space is in the index 0 and the last one in index 9. Then inside these memory locations, we actually store the element values, which is actually from the double data type. So here my list is array reference variable, and here is to access the array element by using indexes. So here, for example, array element at index 5 is 34.33. So this is the index, and this is the value stored in the memory location. And this is the first reference, which is the first location that the array variable is pointing to. So basically, we said here that array is a reference type. This leads us to define the another type, which is the primitive type. Primitive type, this reference type. Array is reference type, but integer, character, double, Boolean is actually a primitive type. So the difference between a primitive and reference, that primitive type like Boolean, byte, character, short, integer, long, float, and double store the value directly in the memory location. Whereas in reference type, we are basically storing the reference to the memory location. So primitive type variable store in its location in the memory the value itself declared in, of its declared type. Whereas all non-primitive types, which is the actually reference type, usually like classes, like string, like scanner, like array, they store the location of the memory that start the data type, that starts the value of this data type in. So a reference type variable or a reference store in its location and memory the address or the location of an object. So basically, if I said integer array grades, basically it will store the location or the address in the memory where the names or the grades will be start storing. But if I said integer grade, this means the grade variable here, it will hold immediately the value of the integer data type. So this is the difference between a primitive and reference. Reference will store the memory location. Primitive will store the value directly. So such a variable is said to refer to an object in a program. So we have string, scanner, array, all this actually, and also objects of classes, all this actually is primitive data type. So if we create a new variable out of this data type, basically we are storing the memory location and not the real values. But if we define byte, character, Boolean, short, integer, long, float, or double, we are basically saving the value immediately in the memory location where we defined these type. So here, the following diagram represents the difference between primitive type and reference in storing data in the computer. So let us see here, for example, we have variable A of integer data type with the value 10. So in the computer memory, we will actually have access to a memory location with variable A, and inside this memory location, we will store the value itself, which is actually 10. But here string is equal hello. String, we said it's actually storing the reference to the memory location having hello value. So in the memory location, we will have access to S variable, but there in the memory location, we will store the memory location where is hello is actually stored. So here it says 2307, which is actually a memory location. So in the 2307, which is in memory location, we will store the hello value. So it's not direct value, but it is memory location, whereas this value can be accessed to. Or we can say new string with hello. So all of them will be pointing to the memory location. So if it is primitive, it's store the value immediately. If it is one of the reference type, then it will store memory location, whereas the value is actually stored. To describe it also, A memory location store 10, but S is actually storing a pointer to where the real value is stored. So 2307 is basically locating or pointing to address 2307 in memory location, whereas the actual value of string is really stored. So if we said later integer b equal a, we will have in the memory location with b variable and have the value of a. So here we will have 10. If I said string t equal s, this means in the memory location t, we will have the same memory location pointing to s. So s here is pointing to 2307. T will also point to 2307. So both of them, S and T, will point to the same memory location. But A and B is actually two different locations which have different the same values. A have 10 and B have 10. So, yes, is there a question?
Yeah, I have question, please.
Yes.
Sorry here. Sorry for that. What I am understand here, any digit number should be saved in the computer memory.
Any what?
Any digit with what we customer enter. I mean here, all this number should be saved in the computer memory, or
yes. Yes. Basically, what is variable? Variable is location memory. You can access it by names. So if I said the memory location with the name sum, you will store some value there. You can access the sum value by just calling the variable name sum. Get the point? So basically, we store in the memory location the values we needed in our program, but to access that values, we need some names, which is actually the variable names.
Okay.
Okay, so to access this value, we have a primitive and we have reference type. Primitive will store in that memory location the value like A and B here, but if it is reference, then it will store the memory location of where
pointer.
Value. Yes, where is this value is really stored. So it's like a pointer or address. So here is actually the address of the real value. Where is it stored? Like S and T here. You can see it's pointing to the same memory location. Whereas A and B, which is integer data type, having the value itself stored in the same memory location. Let me explain it بالعربي. فهنا عندنا نوعين من البيانات أو كيف تتخزن الفاريبلز. طبعا هي الفاريبلز تتخزن في أماكن في الميموري، فعلشان أوصل إلى المكان المحدد في الميموري أسهل لي إني أستخدم الفاريبل نيمز اللي هي أسماء المتغيرات زي A و S و B و T whatever. فإذا كانت primitive زي الانتجر زي الكاركتر زي البوليان، نخزن الفاليو على طول في نفس المكان اللي سمينا فيه الفاريبل. يعني الميموري لوكيشن اللي اسمه A بخزن فيه 10. لكن إذا كانت reference type نخزن فيها memory location ثاني فيها الادرس اللي فعلا يأشر على الفاليو اللي راح تتخزن. زي هنا مثلا اس وتي خزنا في 2307 اللي هي اساسا اماكن ميموري ثانيه بتكون مخزنه فيها الفاليو الفعليه. نستخدم الريفرنس تايب بالعاده لما نحتاج نخزن اكثر من فاليو من نفس نوع الداتا تايب، زي لما يكون عندي array، زي لما يكون عندي objects array of objects، زي لما يكون عندي string. ف in this case نحتاج اماكن في الميموري متتاليه علشان يسهل التخزين ويسهل الوصول لها. ففي هذه الحاله نخزن فقط اللوكيشن، واذا نبغى نوصل الى واحد من هذه الفاليوز اللي already stored نوصلها باستخدام الاندكس. يعني اس عند الزيرو هي عباره عن الفاليو اللي stored في اللوكيشن 2307. اس عند ال1 بتكون عباره عن الفاليو اللي stored في 2308 وهكذا.
هنا دكتوره كيف اسوي الديفرنت بين الفاريبل اذا كان انتجر ولا سترينج ولا؟
هنا اساسا من نفس البرنامج from starting البوينت كيف you define the variable. اذا قلت integer، اذا قلت boolean، اذا قلت واحد من هذيل الداتا تايبز اللي هنا البريميتيف تايب boolean byte character short integer long float or double، خلاص في مكان في الميموري بيتسمى بنفس اسم الفاريبل اللي انت اخترته وبيتخزن فيها الفاليو اللي بتحطها فيه. لكن إذا كنت مثلا معرف الفاريبل string scanner or array أو حتى objects، خلاص بيكون عندك pointer إلى وين هذه الداتا تكون مخزنة، زي الاس والتي في الإكزامبلز هنا. فبيكون عبارة عن memory location. فهنا اس وتي قاعدين يأشروا على نفس الميموري لوكيشن، مع إنهم أساسا الاس وتي ثنتينهم variables، بس ما راح تكون مخزنة فيهم الفاليو نفسها، بتكون مخزنة memory location. Clear now?
Yeah, clear. Thank you.
Very good. Allah yeah. So let us carry on. We need to understand how we could declare array variables and how we could initialize array variable. We start the line with defining the data type. Then we place the curly bracket, then we write the name of the array variable, which is actually array reference variable. For example, double square bracket my list will create a list with the name my list, and we can store double values inside it. So we will create array, and we could store double values inside this array. We could also use this style by placing the square bracket at the end of the variable, but this is actually not preferred. Like if we said here double my list, then we place a curly bracket, and don't forget the semicolon. We could also, as we say in the example, to identify the array size, which is basically how many elements or how many space in the memory you want to reserve for this array. So this is basically how it's start reserving the space in the memory. You will say the name array reference variable equal new data type, then you will mention the array size inside the square bracket. For example, you will say my list equal new double 10. This will reserve 10 location memory enable to store double values inside this memory location. You will access them with the name my list. So my list in 0 reference is the first element in the memory location, which is basically the first element in the array. The last one will be an index 9. So my list 9 reference the last element in the array. Array can be declared and created in one step by this way. You will determine the data type, then you will place the square, بعدين you will type the name of the variable, then equal a new data type array size. So, for example, we have my list array able to store double values, and the size of this array is 10. Either two sentences are correct, so placing a square bracket before the variable name or after the variable name are both accepted. The length of an array basically determine how many elements this array hold. Once you create your array, its size will be fixed. You cannot change it. So each array has a length, and the length basically determine how many elements there. We can check how the length of an array variable by using dot length method. Okay, so here my list dot length return 10, which is basically 10 elements in that array. When an array is created, its elements are assigned the default values. So if the array is basically numeric, primitive data type like integer or double, then the default values will be 0. If it is character, then it will be the I think this is the space values. And if it is Boolean, then the default value will be false. The array elements are, so as you can see here, we have index 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 will basically pointing to the first element in that array, and the last element in the array, we could access it by the length of the array minus 1. So array index, the array index are 0 base, so it starts with 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, until the length minus 1. So the last element, basically, we could access it always by using dot length minus 1. So in my list, where we have 10 values or 10 elements in that array, the first index 0, the last index will be 9. Each element in the array is represented using the following syntax. So you will write the name of the array variable, then you will indicate the number of the index inside the square bracket. Indexed variable can be used in the same way as regular variable. We could use it to sum two values, to subtract, to do whatever operation we want to do. So the second value inside my list, for example, array, will equal the first element of my list array and the second element of my list array. Okay, so here we could make some operation. How to initialize an array? There are many ways. So the first point, you need to declare the array first, then you need to initialize it. You could initialize the array and declare it in one line, like here, defining my list, which is double array, and the initial value is 1.9, 2.9, 3.4, 3.5. So basically, you mention the elements of the array and separate them with comma, and you place the whole element inside the curly bracket. This will reserve in the memory location. For memory location, the first index is 0, the last index is 3. The length of this array is 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically, the length, the number of elements. We could also define it and initialize it in this way: double my list equal new double 4. So we basically determine the size of the element in the first line. Then we assign the values based on indexes. So my list in index 0 equal 1.9, which is the first element here. Then my list at index 1 equal 2.9, which is the second element here. So you assign basically each a value to each index, 0, 1, 2, 3. So in 4 lines, or you want in 1 line, both are accepted. You could also short the syntax in one statement or split it. Split it would cause a syntax error. You need to define it, declare the sentence in this way or the array in this way, then assign the values by using indexes or in one line like the first line here. But if you will split it in this way, this will cause an error. It will give you syntax error as you need to assign it on based on indexes in this way. So either you write it in one line or store the values based in indexes. We have here the piece of code. Let us see. We have a array, store integer values, will hold 3 elements. So basically A will point to a memory location where we will store integer values. Then we have also B array designed to store integer values, but the length of this array is 5. So B basically pointing to a memory location where we could store 5 integer values. So starting from B0 until B4. For A, starting from A0 until A2. Then we will start assigning the values. So A at index 0, we will assign the value 3. So here A and 0. Before we move on, here is the initial values, the default initial values. So as it is integer data type, so the default values will be 0 for A array and also 0 for B array. Then we assign the value 3 to A at index 0. This will change the value from 0 to 3. Then A at index 1 will have the value of A at index 0, which is basically 3 plus 2. This will lead us to 5. So 5 will be stored in A at index 1. At A at index 2, we will increment the values there by 1. So it was 0, then it will become 1. So this is in this line. A at index 2 will have the value 1. Then we have defined integer variable x, which is actually memory location x, will have the same value of A at index 2. A at index 2 basically was 1, so x will have the value 1. Then we have y variable. Y variable have the value of A at index 2, which is 1 minus 1. So 1 minus 1, this will be actually 0. Then we have the variable z have the value of A at index 2 minus 1, which is actually A at index 1. So A at index 1 is 5, so z will be 5. We have the variable also w have the value of A at index 2. A at index 2 is actually 1, but we will decrement it by 1. So A at index 2 is 1, then it will become 0.
Sorry, miss.
Yes.
How we get 5 in A index 1?
A index 1. A index 1 become 5 from which point? A at index 1 we have here. A at index 1 actually have changed its value by summing the A at index 0, which is basically 3, from 3 here, plus 2. So it's become 5.
Yeah, okay, thanks, miss.
For this W, we basically have A at index 2, which is the last value was 1, or I'm missing something. Yeah, here, because we incremented plus plus, then we have it here minus minus. So when we increment it, it's become 1. Then when we minus it, it's become the primitive data type, so it's become 1. If I said A equal B, both of them is array data type, basically A will reference to B array. So basically we lost the reference to A variable, to A array. Then if I said A, give me the length of A dot length minus 1 plus plus, A dot length now become actually 5 minus 1, which is basically 4, plus plus, which is actually the last element. So we increment the values of this index here. A dot length, which is 5 minus 1, 4. We need to increment it from 0. It will change the value to 1. Okay, so basically anything inside the square bracket will represent the index. And the operation outside will represent the operation on the values. Okay. Any question? Okay. So here we have an example. We have a class initialize array. We define an array with to store integer data values. We give it initializing values 32 at index 0, 27 at index 1 and sequentially. Then we have 64, we have 18, we have 95, we have 14, 90, 70, 60, 37. So basically to access these values, we will use the array from index 0 until index 9. So if we initializing the array in this way, from left to right, index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. If we want to print these values stored inside the array, then we will write the heading of the columns here, the index and the value. So we represent them as string, index and value. Then to output the values or the values stored this array, we will use a loop starting from 0 until the array dot length. Every time we need to increment the index, so we will print the value, which is the actual the I, the index. We will print array at I, which is actually holding the value of this array. Okay. Is there a question?
No, it's all clear.
Okay. So here, if we said assigning to each element in the array one of the even integers from 2 to 20. So we want to store, for example, inside each index of this array, a value, the even number, from 2 until 20. In this case, we will define the length 10 as final value. Final value actually constant, so we cannot change it during the program. So by defining a variable as final, we basically defining it as constant. So array length will be always 10. Then we define the array here, array of integer data type equal new integer array of length. This means we will create an array with 10 places in the memory. Then to calculate the value for each array element, we will use a counter starting from 0, which represent the index, until the length, which is actually already 10 places. So from 0 to 10. Every time we will increment the counter. Notice here it's less than 10. So if the counter or I become 10, basically it will not go inside the for loop because it's not equal to. So basically I will be representing the index from 0 until 9, because if it's reached 10, this means it will not go inside the for loop. What we need to do inside this for loop, every time let the value at index I equal 2 plus 2 multiply I. So when I first become 0, 0 multiplied 2 becomes 0 plus 2. This will give me 2. So basically, 2 values will be stored at index 0. Then if I become 1, 2 multiply 1, 2 plus 2, this will give me 4. So basically 4 will be stored at index 1 and so on until we reach index 9. 2 multiply 9, 18 plus 2, this will give me 20. So 20 will be stored in index 9. Then to print, this is only to store the values in this way inside the array. So if we want to print this array, we will use also another loop, the same definition in that loop. We will use a counter from 0 until the length. Every time print I and print the array at I index. And this will print it inside, will print it on the output screen. So if we define a variable as final, we basically changing the status to constant, and we're supposed to give it initial value before we can use it in our program. Attempt to modify a final variable will give you, after initializing it, will give you compilation error. Attempt to access the value of final variable before you initialize it also will give you compilation error. Naming convention of constant, if you want to define a constant variable, this means you have to define it as capital letter, like by variable here. So by constant, we define it as final of double data type. It's supposed to be in capital letter. And if it is 2 words, then you will separate them by the underscore. So if you want to initial an array and print its value, you need for sure counter starting from 0 until the length of the array. Inside it, you need to use the index. Usually it's the counter there. This will representing your index that you could access the value. So here system.out.print my list at I index plus a space. This will basically will print the values inside this array. Here to read the values, so to assign the values to your array, you need also for loop. This for loop initial value will be from 0 until the length of the array. يعني لما نحتاج نخزن value داخل هذا الارray أو نطبع، فمعناها دائما راح نحتاج loop. اللوب الكاونتر حقها راح يمثل لي الاندكس حق الاري،
البداية والنهاية.
البدايه والنهايه. فالبدايه راح تكون الزيرو حقت الاندكس 0 دائما، والنهايه دائما بتكون دوت اللينث الاري دوت اللينث اللي هو اخر عنصر. فبالتالي كل مره ممكن تسال اليوزر دخل فاليو وبتدخلها بهذه الطريقه ماي ليست عند الاي ايكوال انبوت دوت نيكست دبل ولا وات ايفر كانت الفاليو، زي ما احنا متعودين نقرا. في حاله الطباعه اللوب بتكون نفس الهيدر، ولكن البرينتينج بتكون عباره باستخدام الاندكس فقط، كول الاري والاندكس. اوكي، فطبعا الفاينل exam for sure you will have an array different operation على الارray, so practice to do it by hand. If your final exam was on hand or it will be on computer, then you were supposed to be ready. يعني I'm already يعني highlighting this point to you. Summing all elements, if you طبعا here we are discussing the most operations that we can use it on array. So one of the operations that we usually do it on array, if we want to summing all the elements inside the array. In this case, if you need to calculate the sum of the elements in array, you need to define variable to hold the sum. Then your counter will be the same. So the same header for your counter. Always start the counter in your loop from 0 until the length of the array, my list.length, and increment the counter by 1 to pass on each element of that array. What you need to do here, let the total equal the total, the previous total, plus the value of index I, so my list at I. So every time it will pass on the elements of my list and also calculate the values. To find the largest, you will define a variable maximum and assign it the first value of that array. So it will be my list in index 0. Then in your counter, you need to initialize I from 1 and not 0 as usual cases. يعني راح نبدأ هنا الكاونتر من 1 لأن already we will suppose that our first value of that array holding the maximum value of the array. Then we will start compare between the value in max and between the value at that index I. So if the value was in the index I greater than the values hold in max, we will swap them. So basically max.
Assign it to the max.
Yes, basically we will swap the value of max with the value of index I. In this case you will pass on each element. يعني راح نمر على كل العناصر اللي مخزنة في الارray ونقارن. إذا كانت الفاليو المخزنة في الاندكس I أكبر من الفاليو المخزنة في الماكس بدلها. خلي الماكس تساوي my list at index I. Another operation we do it usually on array is shifting element. Shifting element is basically we move the elements one space to up. يعني we push the elements one space or one location in advance. So if we want to shift element to left, like the pictures here, so at the last element supposed to come to the elements before it, and the first element in the array supposed to be the last element. So basically what you need to do here, you need also a loop starting from 1 until the length. You will swap the elements. So the values at index I minus 1, so I minus 1 will have the value of my list at index I. So I will be, the value there will be placed on I minus 1. Then the last things you need to do is moving the first element to the last position by using this statement outside the loop. So you will set my list on my list.length minus 1, which is actually the last element. Let it equal temp. Temp at the beginning, I forgot to say this. Temp is actually a variable, will hold the first element in the array. Then you will start swapping. So here we have an example, analyze numbers. We supposed to read values or numbers from the user. Then among this number, we will calculate the average and found how many numbers are above the average. So before I move on, if I read, for sure I will need scanner. If I need to calculate the average, then you need to define variable called average. If you need to find how many numbers are above the average, this means you need to compare every time the entered value with the average variable. So if the entered value was greater than the average, this means you need to increment the counter by 1.
بس دكتور عندي سؤال.
Yes.
compute the average. الافريج قصدنا نحسب اول شيء اللي هو عدد الافريج تبع الارقام صح؟
Yes.
يعني
yes.
نمشي بالليست ونجمعهم نقسمهم على عددها. after that نمشي رقم ونشوفه اذا هو اكبر من الافريج ولا اقل. اذا اكبر من الافريج نزيد الكاونتر 1.
Yes. يعني هنا how many loops we need?
How much what?
How many loops we need?
لوبس عندنا 2 لوبس. اللوبس الاولى اللي هي اول حاجه بتدخل الارقام سكانر من اليوزر وعندك
the last الى اللينث. yes exactly
الى اللينث.
وبعدين
تمام. اللوب الثانيه اللي هي انت بتجمعين فيها التوتال حق التوتال حق الافريج وتقسمينها على عدد، والكاونتر بيزيد وبتاخذي الفاليو during this loop تقارنيها كل اي مع الافريج.
Exactly. So basically we will need two loops as you said. The
Yes.
first loop to read the values we store it في array. Okay. And every time we will calculate the sum. Outside this loop we will calculate which one?
الافريج لانه انت السم على العدد هو الافريج.
Yes, so basically we have a sum inside a loop, we will count it inside the loop. Outside the loop, we will calculate the average. Then we need another loop to check.
اللي هي comparing.
Yes, comparing. Yes, you do comparing. The value in this index, is it greater than the average or not? If it is greater, then counter plus plus. Otherwise, no increment.
We will not count it as a counter.
Yes. So basically, this is the idea of the program, and this is the code. So here, as we need the user to enter some value, we will use input. We will ask him, please enter the number of items to determine the length of the array. Then the user enter n variable. Then we will define an array with n length. So basically here we declare the array variables. Then also we need to calculate the sum, define it outside the counter, outside the loop. There is someone, his mic is on. Can you please make sure your mic is off? Then we have system.out.println. Now we will start reading from the user the values we need to store it inside this array. So basically we ask him first how many elements you want to enter. Then from this input we will create the array based on the length. Then we will start our loop from 0 until n. Every time little values at index I equal the values entered by the user, and some equal the values entered by the user. Outside the loop, we will calculate the average, which is actually the sum divided by the number entered by the user. Then we will start another loop. We need this counter because we need to check how many values entered by the user is above
the average.
Yes. So from 0 until n, every time check if the values at index I is greater than the average, then an increment count by 1. Otherwise, nothing will happen. At the end, outside of these two loops, we will only print the average, and we will print the number of elements above the average. Okay. Another operation, if we want to copy an array, basically in this case, if you said list2 equal list1, we basically refer the memory location of list2 to point to the same memory location list1. So if I said like this sentence, list2 equal list1, list2 will point to the same memory location where list1 is pointing to. يعني اثنينهم بيأشروا على نفس المكان، فبالتالي the elements of list 2 will not be have access to. ما راح يكون عندنا access إلى element اللي مخزنة في list 2 variable. If I said list 2 equal list 1. Okay, so you will lose the access to the component of list 2 array. If you want to copy the elements, this means you need a loop. Every time you need to say at index I, let it equal the source array at index I. So basically, you have an array having 2, 3, 1, 5, 10 elements, and you have the target array equal a new integer array from the same length of the source array. So basically here we create another array from the same length of another array. Then from 0 until the length, every time let the values of at index I in the target array equal the value of I in source array. This is how we're supposed to copy elements from an array to another array. If we want to pass it to a method, then in the parameters, we will pass the array here. So we will say array from integer data type. Then inside the code, we will deal with it as it is a local variable, normal way of dealing with it. From I0 equals 0 until the length, every time print the values of the array at index I. If we want to invoke it from the main program, then we have to define it earlier in the main program. Like here we have list variable from integer data type, and this is the initial value. So to pass it to this method, we will basically use only the name of the array. So list here is actually array, and here is parameter array. Or we could invoke it in this way by calling the method name and assigning and creating, initializing the array directly from the parameters here. So we will say new integer array having this value. And this way we call the array as anonymous array because we don't have it in memory location. We just pass the value immediately. So anonymous array is one that has no explicit reference variable. We define it immediately when we need it, and we give it the values. Pass by value. Java use pass by value to pass argument to a method for a parameter of a primitive type value. The actual value is pass. So if we have primitive type and we want to pass it to a method, we basically pass the value itself. Changing the value of the local parameter inside the method will not affect the value itself to the variable outside the method. But if we using a reference type, basically we pass the memory location, and this reference is passed to the method. Any change you do it to the reference type variable inside a method will affect the values of this variable outside the method. So we have to be careful about passing the argument to a method. So this is an example. We have here variable x equal 1, and we have array y to hold integer values designed to store 10 elements. If we want to invoke m method with argument x and y basically the first argument is actually supposed to be integer number. Then the second parameter is supposed to be an array holding integers values. So this is how we invoke it from the main program. So x supposed to be integer value, which is equal 1. Y basically is integer array with 10 elements. Inside the so here, let us trust the program. This is our main program. We have memory location x equal 1. We have array y with 10 memory location. Then we invoke the method m, x, and y. So this will pass 1 to the memory location to the method, and y to the memory method. Inside the method, first line will be printed as number, which is actually 1. So this sentence will be printed on the output screen. Number is 1. Then we will change the values of number. Number equal 1001. This will be only inside the method. So we change the number values inside the method. If we print it on the screen, the values inside the method will be printed. So a number is 1000 will be printed on the output screen. Then we will do the same with the array. So we will say number at index 0 will equal 5555. So we change the value of the first element. If we want to print it, number 0 is number 0. Inside the method, this will print number z at index 0 is 5555. Then we will back to our main program and check the values of x and y. System out println x is x basically will have x equal 1, which is in the main program, because it is a primitive. So no change inside the method will be reflecting to the main variable from in the main program. So x is still 1, and this will print x is 1, which is as it is in the main program. But if I try to access the values y at index 0, this will basically print 555, the values stored inside the method. So by using the call stack, when I define the main program x and y, then I pass 1 to assign 1 to variable x and assign the reference to variable y. Then we pass them to the method m. This will assign 1 to the first variable, which is number, the first parameter, which is number, and will pass the reference to the second parameters, which is the array numbers. So if I change the values of x inside the method, this will change it inside the method only and print it. But the array reference is actually referencing to the same memory location, whereas accessing the same memory location. We will call the array of 10 integer values a heap here. Array are stored in a heap. So when we invoke m, x and y, the value of x and y are passed to number and numbers. Since y contain the reference value to an array, numbers now contain the same reference value to the same array. يعني الاثنين بيأشروا على نفس الميموري لوكيشن، سواء كان من المين بروجرام أو كان من الميثود. عشان كذا الفاليو بتتغير، بس البريمتيف تايب لا. So the Java virtual machine stores the array in an area of memory called a heap. So what is heap? Heap is actually array and memory location area and memory location used to store array variables. Searching an array, if we want now to search a value inside the array, usually we do this process if we are looking for a specific value inside this array. Usually we do it most of the time while using the computer, and it's one of the basic tasks in programming. So there are many algorithms used to search inside an array. One of them is the linear search. Linear search will compare the key elements, the element that you usually want to find it inside this array, passing in that array inside each element by using the index, and comparing. If the values is found, then return true, otherwise keep moving the index to the next index. So the method continued to do so until the key match one of the elements inside the list, or actually we reach the end of the list without finding any result. So if we found the result, we will return the index of what we returned here is actually the index of where is that value is stored. If no match, then we will return -1, as this will mean we try to find the element inside that array but without succeed. This is where how we usually do it. So we have index. We will pass 2 elements to this method, the array itself and also the key that we want to find it, the value that we need to find it and search inside the array. The loop will be from 0 until the length, then compare. If the key is equal list at index I, return the index I, otherwise return -1. So we need the other parts here return, because in this method we're supposed to return integer values. So either the return value out of this method will be the index where we found this value, or -1 which is mean that we couldn't find the value. So here we have, yes.
دكتور بعد ممكن تفهميني الريتيرن ايش الوظيفة حقتها؟
Yes, الريتيرن هنا راح ترجع الاندكس إذا شاف الفاليو اللي يدور عليها. فهنا في هذه الميثود بمرر له حاجتين، الاري وبمرر له الفاليو اللي ادور عليها. فاذا شافها بيرجع الاندكس اللي مخزنه فيه، اذا ما شافها راح يرجع -1. ففي البرنامج راح نشوف الاندكس اذا كان -1 فمعناها بنقول له انه ما شفناها، واذا كان فاليو اكبر من الزيرو فمعناها بنستخدم الفاليو زي ما احنا نبغى. وضحت الان الريتيرن؟
هي بتتخزن في الاي يعني؟
لا، الاي بيمثل لي الاندكس حق الاري. فهنا في الهيدر حق الميثود هذه we determine ان هذه الميثود will return integer data type. ف suppose that we couldn't find the value, then there is يعني اذا ما شاف الفاليو اللي يدور عليها فمعناها ما راح يرجع اندكس هنا. دور على في كل الاري وما شاف الفاليو اللي يدور عليها، فمعناها هذا البارت ما راح يتحقق، واحنا لازم نرجع فاليو. ففي هذه الحاله يا اما يرجع الاندكس او بيرجع -1 علشان يقول ان الفاليو ما لقاها داخل هذه الاري. فلا بد يكون عندي ريتيرن هنا.
يعني صارت -1 معناته انه ما وجد القيمه اللي احنا ندور عليها.
اي اللي يدور عليها داخل هذه الاري ما شافها.
تمام.
الله يعافيك. So here suppose we have list with the name myList having the value 1 4 4 2 5 -3 6 and 2. Then we try to find inside myList the value 4. So here we said we will return the index whereas this value is actually stored. So 4 here when it starts searching it found it
index
on
1.
Yes, it will here is 0, here is 1, so it will return 1. It will return the index of the first existing of the value. So whenever here the second 4 found it, it will not return it. خلاص it will be executed only once. Okay, يعني كانت الأربعة موجودة مرة ثانية ما راح يرجع الاندكس حق الأربعة الأولى، راح يرجع الاندكس حق أول 4 يشوفها.
بس
Yes.
نقدر نحط حلقتين 4 وندور على العدد المكرر، صحيح؟
Yes, you can do this.
Yes, okay.
You can do this, but based on this context now, it will return only the first existence of the value. Otherwise, it will, if he didn't found it, if the compiler didn't found it, then it will move in to the other value. And here,
okay.
He found already 1. He found value 4 already at index 1. Then it will return 1.
Yeah, he left the loop.
He will lift the loop. خلاص. Return I. This is what we suppose out of this method. It will go out of the loop. Here we have integer j supposed to store one of the indexes where -4 is stored. Inside this array there is no -4. This will return -1.
-1.
خلاص ما شافها, so it will return -1. -3 will be in the index 0 1 2 3 4 5. So basically this statement here will return 5. فبيرجع الاندكس وين شاف الفاليو, where it found the values. Now string basically stored as array is stored. So if we have here S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, all of them from type string, we could assign the value directly, like here S1 equal welcome. So here we only declare it, and here we give it the values, the initial values. So S1 equal welcome, S2 equal a new string to Java. Here is different ways of initializing the string. So you could define the string variables, then you can give it the initial value, or you could على طول initial the value from the declaration, like s2 equal new string to Java. Or you can also give it the initial values from already created and initialized another string like s3 here equal s1 plus s2. So this is the combination of different strings. Then if we want to print s3, basically having the values of s1 plus space plus s2. So it will become welcome to Java. So here, welcome to Java is basically out of S3 sentence here. Then we have S4 equal new string. This will reserve a memory location to store string values. Then S4 equal.
معليش
Yeah.
دكتورة، بس الاس 2 هنا اوريدي سوى لها تعريف فوق انه string، ليه رجع حط لها new string to Java؟
وين هنا سوى لها declaring بس، فبس
ايوه هي تمام.
عرف.
بعدين هنا اعطاها value، طب المفروض مو هي يعطيها بس value to Java، يعني المفترض يعطوها.
هنا سوى لها بس declaring، هنا اعطاها initial value، يعني هناك قال انا بستخدم variable اسمه s2 بخزن فيه string، ما اعطى قيمه. لما في الاذر sentence هنا اعطاها قيمه، قال ان to Java بتكون مخزنه في الاس 2.
ما هو هنا السؤال دكتورة، النيو سترينج هو ليه كتب نيو سترينج؟ ما كان يكتب جافا بدون نيو سترينج.
هي it can be ممكن تصير
another option.
another option
صح؟
both of them is correct. زي ما سوينا هنا مع S1 we can do with the same thing with S2. It's only different way of declaring. يعني if you go with this option it will be correct, no error. If you go with this one also will be no error. Also you could give it the same way here. You could say S4 equal new string. هنا you initialize with the default values. So S4 will become blank, nothing stored there. Then you can change the values saying S4 plus good day. So it will increment the space, the blank, ما في شيء, with the word good day. If you will print it on the screen S4 good day, it will be printed S4. Then if you want to print the length of S4, so basically dot length, the same method we use it in the array, return the length of the string. بيرجع لي, it will return how many character stored inside that string. The same thing with the array. If we use dot length, it will return the number of elements stored in that array. So here it will print 8 on the screen. Then if we want to print the character at specific location, we will use the method character at, then we will assign it the index. So here basically we could access a specific character stored inside that string by using the method character at. Also, we could print a specific character. So here, S4 at character at 0, it will print the first character, which is actually G. Then to print the last element or the last character of that string, we will use dot length -1. This will give me access to the last letter or character inside that string, which is actually Y. Here, this will give me compilation error because S5 not initialized. So if I said here S5, you can see here there is nothing related to initializing S5. So if I'm saying S5 here, this will be wrong. Give me compilation error. But if I said S5 equal Java only, this will be correct. So class string provides various constructors for creating and initializing string. There is also the empty string as we have seen for S4 here. S4, I think this was the one.
Yes.
Yes, it was S4, yes, here. So basically S4 will create empty string which can also be represented as the blank, is a string that contains no character and has the length 0. No argument constructor creates an empty string. String has a method length, return how many letters or characters inside that string, and we could access a specific character in that string by using the method character at. Accessing a character outside the string, like if we try to access out of the length, index less than 0, for example, results in fatal error. So this will give me error like this exception. So whenever you see this error in your compiled program, this means you try to access a character outside of the string length. So here we have an example. We have to print the word Java. We have word Java. Then we have a counter starting from 0 until the length, so until the end of the word. Every time we will print the character in different line. So print line, we will print the word stored inside the word variable in different letters. So this is supposed to give me J, A, V, A in different line. Then we have another sentence, Arab Java word, we have a counter 0. Then until the length, we need to check if how many letter A exist inside this sentence, Arab Java words. So I'm expecting 1, 2, 3, 4 return out of this loop. So in here, we need to check every time if the character at index I equal A, and increment the counter by 1. At the end, print the counter on the screen. So basically, there are 4 A's inside this sentence. Another example, we have string S2 having the value hello. If I said S1 equal S2.
دكتورة في الاس 1 فوق. الاس 1 حطها hello also.
Yes, here. So S1 have hello, initial value, and S2 have another hello. Basically, these referring to different memory location, even if the values was the same. If I said S1, if S1 equal S2, this means if the memory location of S1 equal the memory location of S2, print refer to the same object, but basically this part will not be executed. So this will return false. Else, print on the screen, S1 and S2 refer to different objects. So this will be printed on the screen at the beginning. S1 and S2 refer to different objects because we said string are dealing as array. So we store the memory location and not the value itself. Then if we want to compare the values, not the memory location, we're supposed to use dot equals. So this means if the value of S1 equal the value of S2, this means this part will be correct as both of them hold the hello value. Print S1 and S2 have the same content, so this will be printed on the screen here. Okay, but if the values was different, then it will print have different content. So if we said S1 equal S2, this will check the memory location if they are referring to the same memory location. If you use S1 dot equals S2, this means we'll check the values stored. Is it the same or not? Then we have another string with the name S3 have hello. We have S4 equal S3. This will basically pointing S4 to the same memory location of S3. So S4 will point to the same S3 here. So S3 and S equal S4. Basically, this will make it point to the same memory location. We have also S5 equal hello. S5 equal hello basically will point to memory location whereas hello is stored. Okay, so when a primitive type values are compared with is equal, basically the result will be either true if the values are equal or false if the values was not equal. When reference variables compared with is equal, which is this sample here, the result will be true if the memory location referred to the same memory location is equal, or false if they are referencing to different memory location. If you want to check the values, then you have to use the method dot equals to compare the values there. Will return true if they are equal or false otherwise. Okay, so to conserve memory, Java treats all string literal objects with the same content as one string object. So basically, they will deal with them as one object, one string object, to which there can be many references. So basically, we finished now from meeting 6. We still have one more meeting, meeting 7, where we will discuss, inshallah, the 2-dimensional array, and I will stop recording this meeting.